My name is Derek Bermel, and I'm a composer and a clarinetist. And I'm really excited to tell you about my project with Sandra Cisneros, The House on Mango Street, the opera. So I got to know Sandra Cisneros in a really interesting way. I had been commissioned by the Chautauqua Institute in upstate New York to write a work which was using all the forces that they had there: the orchestra, the the singers, the dancers, the theater program. And so I chose a work which was very meaningful to me, which was The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. And at first, I was just wanting to write a work that was kind of inspired by her book, because I love the book. It's in a whole bunch of several dozen vignettes, which are, just short, succinct, which tell the story of a young girl who's growing up in Chicago. And it's just such a colorful, amazing book. And so I had this idea to use it as the basis. And I thought about people dancing to it. I thought about, people walking around stage and being dynamic with this piece. And immediately I decided that I wanted to actually set some of the lyrics. And so in order to do so, I had to contact Sandra. And I did so through her agent. And I sent some of my music, and she seemed to really like the music. And we decided to meet when she was next in the United States, because she lives in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. So the next time she was coming to Texas, she told me that she was going to be in San Antonio, and I went down to meet her. And I was very nervous. I sang some of my songs for her, some of the songs that I had written on her, based on the book. And I had been very, very faithful to the letter with her words. Every now and then I would repeat a word or something, but basically I was very, very faithful because, she's a great writer and I wanted to honor her work and I didn't want to change anything. And I went down and I played them for her. And actually it was in a friend of hers' house in San Antonio, and she had about 5 or 6 people there. And I was very intimidated because here I was playing for this great writer who didn't know me at all. And I was playing her songs for her, as lyrics, which she never intended. And afterwards she said, well, I think I'm a lyricist. So I think she really enjoyed them. And we struck up a friendship, and she decided to come up to Chautauqua and see the premiere of the piece together. So after the premiere, which went very well, I started, thinking, boy, this would be such a great subject for an opera. And right now, this book is so relevant because it deals with people coming from so many backgrounds. It deals with the struggles of immigrants coming to the U.S. And it really reminded me of my neighborhood growing up. All the people in it were like people that I knew in my neighborhood. And so I got up the nerve, and when I next saw Sandra when she was in New York, and we met for lunch, and I popped the question, let's say. I said, would you write an opera with me? And she said yes. So she liked the idea. Sandra Cisneros, librettist.
I like to tell stories. I tell them inside my head. I tell them after the mailman says, here's your mail, here's your mail, he says. I like to tell stories.
I think the first thing you have to think about is the scale, because The House on Mango Street is a story told by one character. It's a diary, pretty much. It's a story told by Esperanza, who is the main character, the protagonist of the story. And she's this girl who grew up in Chicago. She moved from place to place, and finally she ends up on Mango Street. And it's not what she expected. And she's disappointed in the house. But she slowly falls in love with the neighborhood. And when Sandra and I were thinking about the opera, we just thought, well, we want to explore these characters. And Sandra was really excited to explore these characters that she had written about all those years ago, 35 years ago, She wanted to think about Lucy and Rachel and their relationship with Esperanza. Lucy and Rachel are these 2 little girls, kind of scrappy. They grew up at the Texas border. They're very mischievous. They're always cracking each other up and making jokes and kind of running pranks, So she wanted to get more into those characters. The characters of, for example, Tito and Sire, and Esperanza's friend Sally, a character who has a kind of melancholy side and also a problematic side, and who's been abused. And so we wanted to kind of look into those characters more. Alicia, who carries her book bag around, who is doesn't have her papers. Esperanza's parents and the people in the neighborhood who have a lot of regrets about their lives, ways they wish things had turned out differently. But at the same time, they are grateful sometimes about where they've landed up, in spite of everything and in spite of their regrets. So I think it gave a chance to open things up and to examine characters in the neighborhood also from a contemporary standpoint. Who are these people today? You know, who do they remind you of in your neighborhood? And you know, who are these kids who are like rapping on the street corner about their lives and who are trying to make sense of the world in which they're living in and where they fit in. There are a number of songs in the opera which are what I call regret songs, and these are songs that Sandra wrote because she wanted to really explore the characters of the townspeople, and especially the ones who had regrets about their lives. And there's a kind of refrain that we have throughout the opera, which is could have been, might have been, should have been. And actually, some of the other characters, they sing maybe, might, could all the time when they're riding around on their bikes. But here, you kind of get a sense for the character's regret. And this is Ruthie, who sings about one time when she was younger, when things seemed better. And so this will give you a little taste of what the regret songs are like. Once I was beautiful. Once we met at a school bazaar. Once he said he loved me. Once I said I do. Once long ago I had a house, pillowcases and plates, towels and a toaster, an alarm clock and drapes, scrubbed linoleum roses, ceiling smooth as a wedding cake. Once when I was beautiful, once when he said he loved me, could have been, might have been, should have been. Once. When I was looking through this book again after many, many years since I read it the first time, I came across one chapter, and when I saw that chapter, I knew I wanted to set this book. I knew this was the book. And it was this chapter, which is almost at the end of the book, A House of My Own. Not a flat, not an apartment in back, not a man's house, not a daddy's, a house all my own, with my porch and my pillow, my pretty purple petunias, my books and my stories, my 2 shoes waiting beside the bed. Nobody to shake a stick at, nobody's garbage to pick up after. Only a house quiet as snow, a space for myself to go, clean as paper before the poem. So when I read that, I thought, there's something about this that sounds like a song. I could almost hear it in my head. And so I sat down at the piano and I started to play it, and then that song came to me, and then many others started to come to me as I read other chapters, and they all seemed to have a different character, but they were infused by a kind of similar sensibility, a similar kind of feeling, a similar kind of sense of humor, sense of rhythm, and sense of lyricism.
an apartment in back, not a man's house, not a daddy's, a house all my own, with my porch and my pillow, my books and my stories, a house all my own, a house all my own, with my porch and my pillow, my pretty purple petunias, a house all my own, with my books and my stories, my two shoes waiting beside the bed, a house of my own. Nobody to shake a stick at. Nobody's garbage to pick up after. A house of my own. Only a house, quiet as snow, a space for myself to go. Clean as paper beside the poet, a house of my own, a house of my
I always love the opportunity to work with the orchestra because orchestrating is like going from black and white to color. It's like having the 8 Crayola box and then suddenly having the 64. And so you get to really work with colors and subtleties, which lets you really explore the nuances of the characters in a special way. And I feel that the orchestra also provides the opportunity to add drama in a way that does not have to do with lyrics, with words, but that is able to tell the story uniquely through music.
a house all my own, a house all my own, with my porch and my pillow, my pretty purple petunias, a house all my own, with my books and my stories, my two shoes waiting beside the bed.
So the next step of the process is really thinking about two main things: a synopsis and a libretto. The synopsis is just a set of scenes. It's the structure. It's like the architecture of the opera. Is it one act? Is it two acts? Is it three acts? Is it 10 acts? In our case, there's two acts. There's two acts with a short intermission, and then you start writing the libretto. So the libretto is the text for the whole thing. It's the actual text that the singers are going to be singing. And that means the arias, but it also means the recitative, the things they sing between the arias, and the choruses, and the ensembles of different sizes. So you have a lot to play with in opera. You have a lot of different formations of the singers that you can imagine depending on what they're singing about and what the action in the scene is. So that all goes into the libretto. Everything, the description about what things look like, the way the scene is set up, and also all the characters speaking in their roles. The thing is, I have theater in my background. It's kind of in my blood because my mom was an actor early on, and later on worked for a director. Her first job was as Stanley Kubrick's assistant, actually. Not a bad first gig out of college. And my dad was a playwright and a translator and taught theater and film. So I grew up going to the theater all the time. I used to go to see, I think I saw every Shakespeare play twice probably before I was out of high school. And he translated a lot of French comedy. He translated almost all the Moliere plays, certainly all the rhyming plays, and he also translated everything from Courteline and Racine all the way through to Feydeau, to contemporary work, Cocteau, and even Italian Gozzi and Goldoni from, the kind of crazy Renaissance and early classic kind of works. So with this theater knowledge, I felt comfortable that at least I would understand what needed to happen theatrically within the work. And it was exciting to embark on this genre that I'd never really dipped my toe into before, and now I was kind of plunging headfirst in. It's funny because in America, our musical theater is almost our opera tradition. And a good example is Porgy and Bess, which is really somewhere in between an opera and a music theater piece. Sometimes it's done almost as a music theater piece, but Gershwin certainly intended it as an opera. Then you have Scott Joplin, who wrote Tremonisha, which is also something, there's a kind of convergence there of these two art forms. And I think that tension really lies at the heart of American opera. And I'm glad that it's there. I think it should be there. It's an inherent tension that we have between musical theater, which is our art form, and this kind of European counterpart of contemporary opera. So I find that it's kind of exciting to walk that line. And working with Sandra has been pretty cool because, of course, there's a lot of folks from all over the place who are in her book, immigrants from different places, and especially from Mexico. And so thinking about Latin music and how that comes into the picture, and a lot of characters relate to different styles of music, which is the way you can portray a character. You can suggest different aspects of a character through the rhythms in the music, through the kind of cadence of the voice, the way they sing, the way they use words, the fast and the slow, the dramatic versus the kind of very staid and solemn, and the different voice types. So there's many, many different ways that you can bring theater into the picture through music. And I think that's kind of what opera and music theater are really all about. There's a song called Four Skinny Trees that Esperanza sings to the trees outside her window, and they give her strength. And Sandra really sees it as a healing song. Four skinny trees with skinny necks and pointy elbows like mine, four who do not belong here but are here. Four raggedy excuses planted by the city. From our room we can hear them. think being a clarinetist has helped me a little bit with singing because already I was thinking always about the line. I'm always thinking about the line when I write. Um, I once had the privilege of driving the composer Krzysztof Penderecki uh, to from Ann Arbor, where I was at school, to Chicago. It was just they needed a driver, and I had the chance to be the driver. So they paid me to drive him for 3 days, and it was really fascinating because we talked a lot about opera because he wrote opera, and he looked at my music and he said that there were two kinds of composers. There was um, there was a harmonist and a contrapuntalist. And the harmonist thinks very much vertically, and the contrapuntalist thinks in terms of line. And he said, "You're a contrapuntalist." Now, I don't know exactly who he thought was a harmonist, but I thought at that moment when he said that to me that my clarinet playing probably connected a lot to that sense of line. Because when you play a one-line instrument, you've always got to be thinking about melody because you are essentially only playing that one part. Now you can do all kinds of things like Bach did, and you can put the melody here and then here and then here and then here. So you toggle between more than one contrapuntal line, two or three contrapuntal lines, like he does in this Bach solo cello suites or the violin partitas. But essentially, you're always thinking about the line, even if it's multiple lines. Of course, I used to sit and sing, bang things out on my crappy piano at home. We had this very old piano, almost didn't work, but kind of beat up, but it did the trick. And my brother would shut the door. He'd be like, "Shut up! You're singing. It sounds terrible," and it did sound terrible. I'm sure it sounded awful, but it was funny because when I got to college, I sang in rock bands in high school, all that kind of thing. When I got to college, I decided I was going to audition for an a cappella group, and so I did. I played a Billy Joel song and sang, and they took me into this group, even though probably my singing chops were not that great. But I think they thought I would be musically good for the group because I could arrange for the group, which I did. I learned a lot about arranging, vocal arranging, from being in that a cappella group, which was at Yale. It was the Baker's Dozen. And so I probably did about 30 arrangements while I was there. Some of them were pretty bad, especially the first few. But after a while, I got the hang of it, and I arranged all kinds of things for the group, including even the Queen Bohemian Rhapsody, things like that, these very, very ornate kinds of pieces, and a lot of kind of soul R&B kind of stuff that we did. But it was great training, and I learned a lot about singing just from being this group of guys where we had to tune to each other. Some of us read music, some didn't. And then, so that was really my experience in the a cappella group. There's another aria for Esperanza. It's called "Sit Out Bad," and this is what you might call an "I want" song. You refer to that in a musical or an opera. It's an aria where the character you kind of learn something about what they really want from life, and it's a kind of moment of truth for them when they might be admitting it to themselves. I wanna sit out bed at night. I wanna be all new and shiny. A boy around my neck and the wind under my skirt. I wanna sit out bed at night. I wanna feel like I'm a real human being. That can't be wrong. I wanna be bad, so bad. Sandra is a natural lyricist. I mean, so we just, and I could tell that from the book. I just knew that seeing the way that she wrote the book. I knew that she was a lyricist. You know, she's a poet, first and foremost, and also an essayist, and also a novelist, a great novelist. But I think her heart is in poetry, and therefore she's lyrical at heart. So she would take the synopsis and she would try to extract from that synopsis, what would this character sing at this moment? What would they need to express in song? And what might they need to express in more kind of spoken type of recitative? And then the songs I would try to make into arias or ensembles, or she would say the chorus should say this at this time, because the chorus represents quite often the people in the neighborhood, or sometimes they represent something else. They might represent a warning. They might represent fate. They might represent a group of women or a group of men, and the chorus creates a kind of tension there in the opera, which allows you to explore subjects that might not be stated by anybody, but might be lingering in the background and be brought to the fore, be questioned by the chorus, be brought into the picture, into the larger questions that the opera is trying to address about society.